Hello, everyone. Welcome to Sweetcast. This is Clint, and we're going to talk about millennials today and comics because I think that possibly this is the cause of a lot of the problems in comics. It's just sort of this disconnect on what the comics industry thinks that they can do to make millennials happy, and then what the reality is. So yeah, we want to talk through some of that kind of stuff. First, just a reminder, I have written this comic book called Downcast. It's already been incredibly successful. So thank you everyone that has backed. If you haven't backed yet, today's a great time to do it. We're getting really, really close to breaking through $20,000 and still, we've got time to go. So this is awesome. So don't forget to check it out. It's in the link in the description below. All right. So millennials. This is a topic that comes up a lot. Quick story. So, in my profession, I do training a lot, and I teach people a lot, and it's on various kind of workplace topics. And one of those topics used to be generational differences. Now, there's two kind of things. Understand that there is research out there on generational differences. There's been a lot of studies that have occurred, but a lot of these studies have been for-profit kind of studies. And so it's been about packaging up information and selling it. That's the truth. What does that mean? That means that you're going to have different definitions of what it means to be a Gen Xer, a baby boomer, a millennial, greatest generation, all that kind of stuff. So I used to do trainings on this, and I used a very specific set of findings, and there could have been other ones, but I used a particular set. So I did trainings on those, and what I found is that anytime we talked about generational differences in a large group setting, it got out of my control, and it ended up being a fight. I tried so hard to lay the groundwork that we're going to have this discussion, and it's got nothing to do with what generation you're from or what generation you're from and what kind of beef you have with somebody from another generation or how you feel about your father or your son or that kind of stuff. But it would always devolve into basically trash talking somebody from another generation, and it would go all ways. Seriously, everybody could find something that they hated about any other generation. So my conclusion was, just don't do it then. Don't do that kind of training, because a company would think, oh, we have a new wave of millennials coming in. We need to figure out these millennials. I think, and this might make some of you upset, because every time, again, you talk about generational differences, this makes people upset. But here's my genuine belief. I think that millennials really, when it comes down to it, aren't all that different from everybody else. There are a lot of different circumstances, and there's a lot of different stereotypes that people want millennials to fit in, and it goes the same with every generation. But I think deep down, people are people, and they kind of go through the same kind of phases of life. Feel free to disagree. I'm not an expert in this field or anything. It's just my observation. So the problem here is that a lot of big companies have been trying to figure out what makes millennials tick, because they want to be able to, feed them into the workforce and utilize them. But this kind of creates a problem, because instead of having millennials go into the workforce and adapt to the realities of the workforce, there are a lot of companies that try and change it the other way around. And I don't think that that's really helpful, because people change throughout their lives. They learn things, they grow, they become adults. And, it seems like it's been a long time, years, last like 10 years plus that people have been talking about millennials so much, like they're kids. The truth is, millennials they're not in their teenage years anymore. They're not in high school. That's a whole new generation that's coming into college right now. Millennials are already in the workforce. They've already passed it. The problem is people are treating millennials like they're children. I think this is the problem, okay? So here's the thing. This is a comic book, Blame It on Pop Music. I just wanted to look through some of this. The article here is really not so relevant. The thing that is relevant, though, is there's this assumption that the comics have figured out what millennials like and how they think and they're desperately trying to to aim for that kind of thinking. So, you get here to X20. I'm trying to imagine a book that I would be interested in. Somebody's listening to music, and there's all this sort of interpersonal, like teen drama kind of stuff. And I guess the pop music was a big deal for this. And this is, to me, it's weird that this is connected. So they're trying to make the real life. There's usually in storytelling, there's two struggles. There's the external struggle and the internal struggle. But the internal struggle in a lot of these books has changed to try and meet what Marvel thinks millennials are thinking about all the time, or that is their big concern. Now, in my opinion, times change. Obviously, you're going to have some of the extra little peripheral things change, but people don't really change all that much. That's why universal themes that work well in movies in one country, actually generally they work well in countries all over the world. They can make movies that have mass appeal because they aren't treating some like weird, like higher middle class, spoiled millennial kind of thinking, or to try to fit that little demographic. And it gets annoying. It's kind of condescending. It's nothing that I'm interested in reading. And so when I see stuff like, this just happens to be an issue of X23, it's just annoying to me, and it's boring. It looks boring. I think part of the problem is that millennials aren't kids anymore. So they want to treat millennials as if they were kids and then write books at a kid's level. It doesn't really make sense. So for me, I'm like, millennials often were born, I guess, 80s, I think mid 80s to mid 1990s. And so Ninja Turtles. When I was a kid, I loved Ninja Turtles. I know a lot of people that love Ninja Turtles. And it had less to do with the internal struggle of, oh, hey, my cell phone doesn't work, or like all this like upper middle class kind of problems, first world problems. Had more to do with, I guess, dealing with brothers and struggle and personality differences and all these kinds of things that still last throughout. It was really cool to see some of this, looking at some of this really early drawing by Eastman and Laird. This is the kind of stuff that I think a lot of people connect to. You might not like Ninja Turtles, but I mean, I do, and I think a lot of people do. That's why it's been such a really popular franchise over time. And this is comics, and it appeals to millennials, or it appealed to millennials anyway. I think it appeals to more people too. That's because millennials would appreciate it when they were kids, not when they were adults. Maybe other generations read it. Gen Xers probably read it more, as adults or teenagers or something. It might have been a little bit different for them. But then let's contrast that here with Runaways. I actually haven't watched this one. Marvel's YA superhero show could be a game changer. Now, again, we went over generational differences. Young adults, YA, we're not talking about millennials anymore. So there's a new generation of kids, and this is what Marvel thinks that is important to the generation of kids. I don't think that this is in control with reality. I think that they're missing something because they've been hiring these kinds of workplace corporate trainers that talk about how to appeal to millennials, and they're doing all this kind of research, and I think that they're overthinking it. This is something that they're getting wrong. So this is YA, but Marvel's Runaways is aimed at millennials, and that's what they've been saying. So millennials don't just stay the same age. They've aged. If I looked at the same picture, I would think this is there's like purple hair here. Here's a pussy hat. This is activism. That's what this tells me. But this is supposed to represent an entire generation. Here's another one, the Champions, and it's when the term millennial is heard, there are many reactions. A common belief is that millennials are children given too much encouragement by their parents and are now entitled and unable to grasp goals like earning high-paying jobs over time. A variant on that is the millennials having desire to help and confidence to do so, but no idea how, leaving them overeager and underexperienced. So they're going to make for these, and we're talking about adults here. I think we've cleared that. These are by most definitions, most metrics, adults. They're not children. But this children's comic, and really in every other aspect, this looks like it's sounding to appeal to children. And I think that's where they get it wrong. That's why that might be some complaints that people have. That's how they see life. But you're not really interested in reading about that because it's super dull. It says both cases can be true, but the truth is most millennials are young people that are trying to find themselves in a very difficult world. The older generations aren't always kind to their supposed successors, and millennials don't always see a world they want to inherit. They've also been swallowed by the stereotype imposed on them. You just finished saying all these stereotypes about what millennials are, and then you said that they're not happy about the stereotypes imposed on them. And I'll tell you, when I did trainings on generational differences, that was everybody's problem, because there are stereotypes about every generation. And while it might be true to some degree, or you can generalize some very broad underlying things, I think generally people are also individuals, and more commonly they're all people. So there are definitely more universal themes that are probably going to be more impactful to millennials than some of these very specific problems, and then package it like it's for kids. None of this really makes sense. To me, it's a slow reaction to kind of dubious research, and I know that they've been looking at this kind of stuff in entertainment because they look at it in all other kinds of industries as well. Okay, now this is their answer to it. Now, it's changed as Marvel has given us the first real millennial super team champions, and they're millennials, but are they in high school or something? Millennials aren't in high school. This doesn't really make sense. Anyway, I think you get my point. I feel like they're getting this wrong. Rather than picking really specific themes that might be the way that some millennials feel, or some Gen Xers, or some, whatever it might be, they should be picking themes that are universal and human, because while you might have some unique problems as a millennial, the bigger problems are going to be the same problems that others have faced before you. They're things that you can relate. They're human. They're natural. It makes a little bit more sense. So all of this kind of bothers me, but I'd be interested to know in what your thoughts are. Let me know in the comments below, and if you haven't yet, don't forget to back Downcast. I promise it has nothing to do with millennials or anything like that. It's a fictional world in the sky. Blue-collar teens are using the power of gravity to fight against a corrupt city to save their father's life. So I will talk to you next time.